Welcome to Decanted with Dave Grega. I'm really excited to introduce my guest here. I have Dustin Mowe. He is the CEO of PortoCork, one of the leading luxury brands that provides corks to the wine industry, not just in Napa, but all over. And he also has started his own brand, MOWE Napa Valley, which I'm really excited. He has an estate property, and he's also working with some fruit from Pritchard Hill as well. And Dustin has just been one of those people who's very connected, very much involved in being a part of the industry and being folded into the mix and really understanding the winemakers, the people in the vineyards. Now he's producing wines himself. And so I really am excited to have him back on. Dustin, thank you for coming. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Cool. So let's jump into a little bit about how did you get to become CEO of this amazing company, that's a supplier in the wine industry, and get to be someone who's connected to all these great winemakers and business owners in the Napa Valley?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I have always been a bit, of a hustler, sales guy at heart. I was the guy that would go, when I was a young kid and buy a jumbo size of Fireballs or gumdrops and take them to school and sell them for 5 or 10 cents a piece, so I've always kind of been that guy. And so I came up through the sales ranks. My first real job was working for Cellular One, which is now AT&T Wireless. And just did that for a short while. And my territory was Napa and Marin County, and just became enamored by the wine business. I was driving around Napa and seeing lots of limos, and I was just like, oh, I want to be a part of this. And so ended up meeting a guy who was a cork salesman, and told me what he did. I was, a little bit taken back. You sell cork? And he said, yeah, it's a really important piece. It's where the it's what touches the wine, so it's super important. And so just became interested. And fortunately for me, his company was hiring. And so I essentially gave him my resume, gave it to his boss, and I joined his company a few weeks after meeting him. So I worked my way up through the sales ranks. I was a sales guy for a company for a few years, and then I took over, or I didn't take over. I joined PortoCork back in 2001. So celebrated 21 years recently, but I joined PortoCork to manage the sales team, and was taking kind of a little bit of a step up in my career, and I took over PortoCork in 2006 as president and CEO. So it's been a good ride, but really the foundation was started just by being a good sales guy, customer service focused, and trying to deliver the best we could to the customer. And really, customer says jump, we say how high.
Right. Yeah. So that's something I've noticed that separates your company from others. And I have worked with PortoCork on wines that I've made, wines for clients, currently working with some clients that use your corks. And one of the reasons, besides the fact that you have a very high quality product that I like to use your company, is that the customer service is always at a 10. And there's always things that are going to go wrong, especially when we're talking about bottling. It's just the way things are. And so having people on your team, glass companies, cork companies, label companies, bottling vendors, that are going to do the very best that they can in situations when they go wrong, makes you feel, it's like an insurance policy. It makes you feel better. It's like, look, I'm okay with things going wrong as long as when they do, that we're doing the best that we can for the wine. And it is sort of like a peace of mind that that you are going to be thought of first by this company. So I think it goes back to just like you were mentioning, your background in sales. And it's interesting to me, I'm learning more and more as I become an entrepreneur, how basic, just classic, how to sell. And I used to think it was all about tricks, and it's not about tricks. It's like, it goes back to Napoleon Hill. It's like basic social skills, give and take, provide value. It's really about providing value, empathizing with people, trying to solve problems for them. to be a solution to their problem. And so a lot of people kind of gloss over those things, but it's like part of your success and the reason that you're able to get to a place where now you're running a company like PortoCork is that you had those fundamentals instilled of basic customer service, basic salesmanship. Can you talk a little bit about that idea?
Yeah, well, I agree 100%. And so like I kind of alluded to, I mean, we have a philosophy in the company where it's, the customer says jump, we say how high. And, it's really, I feel like, we need to over deliver from a service perspective. We really need to have some sort of a competitive advantage in that front. Otherwise, why would they use us? Yes, we have, a great quality team in place. We have, a great company in Portugal that is, only one product focused. We only do cork. So there's no other products. So I think we have kind of a lot of the things in place, but at the end of the day, there's multiple suppliers offering cork. And so what do we do to be different? So kind of our philosophy is that we really, really try to go after the ultra premium and luxury segment. And really have, offer an added value to these clients, and service is a key component of that. So, we're constantly getting, calls of customers saying, oh my gosh, I'm in the middle of bottling and it looks like I'm a couple hundred bottles or a couple hundred corks short. I'm going to be running out of cork at 2 p.m. and it's 10 a.m. and we'll have them cork by 2 p.m. So it's like you have to do that. Some of those things are virtually impossible or almost impossible. But we try to do what we can to pull it off and deliver to customers to keep a customer for life. So I'm super proud of the fact that we have tons of clients that have been buying from us for in excess of 20 years.
Right.
So there's always a lot of movement in this business, but if we continue to be, top class in service and product, customers have no reason to go elsewhere. I mean, price is still something that's talked about a lot in this business, which it really pains me because, as early as yesterday, I was with one of our sales guys telling me that, we're losing this customer because of price. And it's like, I just can't believe people are splitting pennies nowadays on closures when that's, the most important thing touching your wine, right? So,
yeah, this is kind of interesting, Dustin. Like, it's reminding me of some things I've been talking about and thinking about a lot in the wine business. You're starting and have started your own brand. You're just in the beginning stages of developing your own wine brand. And I'm thinking about putting together some investment to make a little bit of wine this year as well. And so as I'm talking with somebody who's going to be a partner and we're kind of running through the numbers and things, and I'm talking to other people, they're giving me their perspective, which is great. But I keep coming across this sort of like impasse where it's like the wine business. It is such a tough business. It's so cash intensive up front. It's especially in Napa, everything costs a lot of money: the land, the facilities, the people, right? The cost of living is high here, so there's like a real hard bottom line. But then there's like the creative, artistic part. It's like a big part of wine is the meaning and all of, and the passion. And it's like, I was having people talk to me about, well, if you make Sonoma Cab from a good vineyard, because of Napa and because of the relation to Napa and the way the market is, you could sell your Sonoma Cab for such a higher margin based on the cost, right? You could sell a $100 bottle of a single vineyard high-end Sonoma Cab made by a good winemaker, and your cost per ton is going to be like 5 times less than what you're going to pay for the same quality fruit in Napa. And I see what they're saying, and they're not wrong. But I just kept thinking to myself, my God, I live life once. If I'm going to make wine for myself, how am I going to feel if like I'm doing it because I get a little more margin? But on the other hand, I need to be responsible so that I can create something that's sustainable. And it's like, I just, this is just reminding me of this kind of ebb and flow, and it's really tough. It's like, you're thinking, why would you ever sacrifice on quality and the level of customer service that you get, which is an insurance policy to make sure that your wine isn't destroyed or something wrong doesn't happen, or years down the road, you discover your corks have an issue, whatever it might be. And I understand why you're thinking that. I think the same way, but not everybody does. And so there's this weird balancing act in the business where it's very cutthroat from a financial perspective. But then there's also this emotional and personal incentive as well for quality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think that you're asking all the right questions of yourself, when you start talking about, that type of stuff. If you're going to do something for yourself, you want to do it, at the highest level, right? I think being a Napa guy, if you're talking Cabernet, it's like you want to do it Napa.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a couple of guys on the smaller scale that are Napa guys that have gotten, for instance, guy I love the wines, and he's a wonderful guy. Is Massimo Di Costanzo, and he's getting he gets some stuff from Farella and Caldwell. I don't know about the Farella anymore, but he also gets some fruit from the Montecito vineyard over in Sonoma on the Sonoma side.
Right.
And so that the wines are great, and he's selling them for the same price as he's Caldwell and whatever. So maybe his margins are a little better on that. I think if he was doing just that wine, probably be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Napa guy, Sonoma.
Well, there's nothing wrong with it. The whole point is, like, for me, like, that wasn't my vision. My highest passion is not Sonoma Cap, and I'm actually thinking about starting with producing Chardonnay Pinot, but that's a whole different conversation. Yeah. Actually, some of my favorite brands, Aubert, Rivers Marie, I love those two brands, and I have a lot of respect for those wines. And
I got to check out the Rivers Marie. I've had their Pinot. I haven't had a lot of Chardonnays, but Aubert Marc, I've known him for years, and our kids went to school together, and so I'm getting a case or two of Aubert every year. So the Chardonnays are outstanding.
Now I wonder.
I took a bottle of Aubert to Burgundy this last year. I was there in November.
Chard or Pinot?
Chard.
Okay, yeah.
So I took a couple of wines, and we had 8 different domain visits, and after one of the visits, we met this guy, really good dude. He's like, "What are you guys up to?" We're not really sure. We're gonna go here or there for dinner, and he goes, "Why don't we meet at the little wine bar downtown and in Bone, and I'll bring some wines and we'll taste some wines, and I have a buddy that I'm supposed to meet up with. I'll tell him to bring some wines, another winemaker." So I'm like, "Oh, cool. I'll bring a couple of bottles of California stuff." So I brought a bottle of Marc's the Aubert. It was the Hyde, and we put that in the glass. And these guys, it's a couple of winemakers, and they're smelling it, nice, taste it, and they're like, giving one of those real, like, kind of thumbs up ish, looks, and they say, "Can I see the bottle?" And I hand them the bottle, and it says 15.2 alcohol in it, and they were
blew their mind.
Then it just became the shittiest wine on the table, but I knew what they really felt.
Yep.
So I think Marc is not shy with alcohol, but those wines are fantastic. I mean,
they are.
I taste them and think of alcohol. But anyway, I think it's just a funny story with the French guys.
So typical, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just French, but it's like everybody has there's so much bias in wine. It's unbelievable. And it's okay. It's part of the fun of wine, is having those sort of those mashups, where it's like, I remember I grew up in Sacramento. That's my hometown. And
go Kings.
Kings. Yeah. Back when Chris Webber and all those guys were there, it was like when I was in high school, and that was like, we were actually pretty good. But in Sacramento, I grew up right down the street from Corti Brothers.
Okay, yeah, cool.
Right. And so I used to shop, my grandma used to shop at Corti Brothers, when Daryl Corti was young, she remembered him. And so I grew up, and I started going, and I would sit there and I'd be like, man, Daryl Corti is standing right in front of me with his little bow tie. And he would have this little, like, it looked like a lab apron, like a blue lab apron. He wore a bow tie and a blue lab apron. And here's this guy, James Beard, Lifetime Achievement Award, wealth of knowledge and experience. And he's sitting here just in my local grocer. And I remember having a lot of conversations with him when I was 20 and 21 years old. I started getting into the wine business when I was 20 years old, right when I got out of the military. And I remember talking to him, and he was just so hardlined on these rules about alcohol. And if a wine is above 14.5, he won't even taste it to come in and be involved with his store. He was just hardlined on that. And he had all these ideas. And it's like, the guy is a legend. He's had so much experience, but I just kind of took that, and it was like, I wasn't going to try to argue with him, obviously, but it's just interesting how there's these ideas that are so true,
At the end of the day, the wine needs to be delicious. And so, we don't want to go on here and start naming names, but it's like, I've known, certain producers that are very into, low alcohol, Cabernet shouldn't be harvested at 26 or more. I mean, lots of guys are higher than that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they have, one particular guy is making a, $90 Napa Valley Napa Cabernet, and it's 12.8 or something like that alcohol, and it's not good.
Yeah,
in my opinion, but it's, at the end of the day, it's lost its deliciousness factor.
Yeah,
and so I just don't, it's like, I understand wanting to be a little lower in alcohol, but there becomes a point where it's just, you've gone a little too far, and the wine is angular and austere, and whatever. So.
Oh, but it'll age for 50 years. It's like, okay, no. It's interesting what you're touching on it. And there are those guys, right, that are, picking Cabernet on like August 1st, and it's like, okay, I don't mind those guys so much, because philosophically they're exploring a spectrum. And I think that that's actually a good thing in a sense. It allows for something to bounce off of and to compare. It allows for a conversation. They can experiment with that, and I can taste their experimentation, and I don't have to do it myself, and I can gain something from that.
Yeah.
The real stuff that I kind of have the issue with is like the in-betweeners. And so it's like, what really bothers me just personally, that's it. It's not a rule, but just personally, I get bothered by a wine that I taste that's good, beautiful, pretty well balanced, but I know in my heart, if they had hung that fruit for 8 more days, there would have been just a little more roundness there would have been a little more integration, just another half layer of complexity. The wine would have just had a little more presence, and it would have aged perfectly well. And that frustrates me, because it's like, that's somebody who's scared to commit in my mind. Now, I could be totally wrong about that, and I probably am in some cases. Somebody might just really, like, that's what they want. Although, to be honest with you, I have an inkling that that's just somebody telling themselves a story. This is what I really like this style. It's big, but it's slightly restrained. And I'm like, to me, the translation in my mind is, now you're setting a left and right margin to play it safe. And you're saying that you really love this style, and it's just really about doing something that's familiar and safe to you. And then of course you're going to find people who say, "Whoa, we love your wine." If 0.5% of the total wine consumers in California love your wine, you're selling out of 2,000 cases. So if you're selling out of 2,000 cases, you're getting the feedback. People like your wine. You're doing well in business. Why the hell would you even try anything else?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing to sort of think about.
Well, and I think people that go that different direction, pretty, kind of, with a hard line, like, I'm going to be under X and I'm going to do this. Mm-hmm. I think you find a lot of people will buy, off of, interest, just trying to understand what you're doing, or maybe they've heard your story. And so you'll get somebody who will be a one-time buyer, but you really want to have, a multi-time buyer, right? So I think that, in my opinion, a lot of people who have gone that route, the wines are interesting, but I'm not going to buy it, or I'm not going to, it's not going to provoke me to want to buy again. So.
Yeah, I kind of piggybacking off some of this is sort of a similar idea, and I was talking to, I've talked to a lot of people about alcohol and ageability in wines, especially because I'm in Napa, right? So the common thing is that, these high alcohol wines are blowing out and they're going to taste like crap in 10 years. Some of them do. Some of them don't. Yeah, a lot of them don't, actually. And I think that people would be surprised just how much a good quality grape that is treated well, that is extracted well, that is handled well and cared for, and is ripe and does have a higher alcohol percentage, how well the alcohol actually is a preservative of the fruit and the structure of the wine. And I think that for some reason, people think acid preserves wine. And I promise you this, I disagree. I disagree. From all of my experience, tasting so many of these wines that are in that higher alcohol range, and tasting obviously all kinds of wines from all over the world, and tasting them new, middle-aged, and very well-aged. I think that if you have a high-quality grape that is made well, and it has the layers, it has the complexity, and it is in balance, but it's also a high alcohol wine, I think that alcohol actually preserves the life and expression. Yeah, I was talking to Aaron Pott about it years ago. This is a long time ago. We were he made wines at one of the many facilities that I made some of our clients' wines at, and so we had a lot of downtime just chit chatting. And that was one thing that he had. If I'm remembering correctly, Aaron, if you hear this, correct me if I'm wrong. But the conversation was that he had this, and this guy's somebody who was at Calon Segur and over in France. He loves French wines, but he was like, "Look, man. Alcohol is a great preservative, and high alcohol wines do and can age just as well as anything else. Not all of them, but many of them." And he had, and I could be getting this wrong, but I remember the gist of it was that Aaron drinks a lot of amazing wines. He has an incredible cellar. He knows people who have incredible cellars, and they bring out these old wines that are just magnificent. And he would take like one of the Cheval Blancs and a bunch of the old, like one of the 1950s Cheval Blancs and some of the great classic wines, and he would send them to ETS. And the pH numbers were a lot higher. They were like Napa pH numbers, and the alcohol numbers were higher in many cases, not all, particularly in the great vintages that aged well. And he started, and I believe that he was sort of hinting at, there's a correlation here between great Bordeaux and Burgundy vintages being warmer, riper to a certain degree. There are some that are a little overblown and don't age well, but generally speaking, the great classic wines are from vintages that provide a little bit higher pH and a little bit more alcohol than the average. And that blew my mind, because coming up as a sommelier, studying for my advanced exam right before I worked my first harvest, and then derailing and going into the winemaking thing, I was taught the opposite. And I was told that was just truth, that these great classic wines aged well because they had this searing acidity ripping through the backbone of them, and they could last forever. And you couldn't open the bottle for 10 years. And if you opened the bottle in the first 10 years, you were an idiot. And that never sat well with me. I'm like, dude, a great wine, I should be able to drink a great wine in the first year. And for what it is, even if it'll last 30 years, it should be able to be a pleasurable experience in my personal perspective. What do you think about that?
Well, and people say that about some of our California guys. I mean, Philip Tony, one of my favorite wines. And, essentially the 19 just came out and I'm like, everybody's like, yeah, lay it down for 10 years. And I'm like, why? Stick it in a decanter and drink it in a couple hours. Right. The wine is killer. So, everybody has kind of their own philosophy on that. I mean, one thing, I've done, Dave, is, coming into this, the winemaking side, being newer, my wife and I, what we said was, how do we define, obviously we want to produce what the vineyard gives. But we know we have an idea of what the vineyard gives, because Aaron from Spotswood has been, a dear friend, and he's been buying the fruit for a while. So he can give me some background and so on. So, but I said, how do we know how far we want to push the ripeness? Right. I do prefer like a little bit higher acid, a little bit more bright fruit character, rather than, kind of that rich, dense, kind of over extracted. And so I said, what I want to do is I want to start opening up a lot of wines, and I want to start analyzing those wines, sending them off to the lab. So
okay.
I have now, because frankly, without knowing, just in my own head, as I said, yeah, I don't want a wine above 15.5 alcohol. Right. I don't want a wine, to be a 4 something pH. I want, I kind of had it in my own head. So I was like, okay, well, let's taste wines. So a lot of times blind, see what we think, and then let's send them to the lab to see what are the numbers. And what I found was absolutely mind blowing. In some ways a bit disappointing, but mind blowing, because and I hate to say this, I'm going to maybe offend some people. Nobody's honest about their alcohol levels, and some people are egregious. I mean, we're talking labeled 14.5 that are 17.2.
Yeah, absolutely.
14.5, 16.9. So we have a fudge factor of 1%. But some people are going way beyond that even. And so, but what I found though is, I kind of had in my head I didn't want to be above 15.5. I didn't want to be above 15. Sorry. And what I found was I have this sheet now about 58 or 60 data points. And what I found is the wines that I really like are typically in that, I have some anomalies, but they're typically in that 15.4, 15.6 range.
Sure.
And as you said, in terms of the acids, like the pH number, for instance, are higher than what I would have suspected.
Sure.
And so, so I think it's very interesting in terms of alcohol. Now I don't really care. I think that what I want in wine is I want that fresh, kind of fruit picked from a tree sort of character, rather than the cooked or the a little ultra ripe where it's kind of has this where you can just tell like this was picked ultra ripe. I'm sure you gather what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And so what I find with that is that number is typically going to be below for sure below 27. Mm-hmm. But that's just I'm a rookie.
That's really interesting that you sort of found that, and having been on the backside of that and making these wines and seeing them and then doing the comparative tastings, I understand it to be the same way. I can personally tell you, I have made wines. I've made 3 wines that were totally dry, that were absolutely delicious. They tasted like balanced 15.5 Napa Cabs, really good Napa Cabs. That were over 17% alcohol. I've personally made 3, and one comes from a vineyard that you've already mentioned today, in the 2013 vintage. Yeah, and 14 was the year we had a lot of those, 2 of those. It was a pretty powerful year. Generally speaking, that's the exception. Generally speaking, though, it is not uncommon to make a Napa Cabernet that is. I will go to the grade swearing that it is a perfectly balanced wine that is above 16% alcohol and in north of 3.8 pH. So that's in people will swear that it's not, but I think a part of the problem here, Dustin, is that it's that we have a couple different things going on, and I try to use an analogy to clear it up. It's like, why do we watch LeBron James or Kobe Bryant and think, wow, greatness, right? It's because you have these people that are 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", these huge human beings that also, for being that tall, are very athletic, agile, balanced, coordinated, which is something usually you lose as you get above 6'6", right? Generally speaking, if somebody's 6'9", they're sacrificing some coordination, some agility, some grace. But when you have an individual who's big, who's smart, can see the field, know the game, make smart decisions, is a leader, has presence, can be graceful and powerful, is perfectly balanced and elegant, it's rare. But when you see that, but it exists, and it exists in a certain amount of people that have the potential, and they take that potential and they focus and practice and hone relentlessly. And then you get a product like a Kobe Bryant or a LeBron James or whoever, or Michael Jordan. And it's impressive and it's awe-inspiring. So the wines I've been making and focusing on in my career have been sort of these from wines coming from great sites that have this potential to be truly, truly great. Not every site is like that, and that's okay. And I think that people are viewing a lot of these wines that are maybe come from less potential, that are made kind of in a sort of haphazard or mediocre, let's just say average way. And somebody is trying to cover up for a lack of detail and finesse with a little bit more power and a little bit more oak, because people like sweet. And so those tend to also, generally speaking, be wines that are larger production, where there's a quota to meet and the bottom line is most important. And those also happen to be the wines that are out in the market away from Napa and away from California around the world. And they're representing Napa wines. And people are tasting them and going, what the heck is this? It tastes like syrup, and this doesn't age well. It's like, well, yes, you're right. However, we don't judge Bordeaux based on the, $30 bottles of Bordeaux that are out there, right? We don't judge them Bordeaux superior wines. That's not what we use as a measuring stick. We judge Bordeaux based on the great wines of Bordeaux, based on the first growths and the second growths and this, culty wines. That's our measuring stick. That's how we know and understand the style, the ageability, the likability, the quality level is based on that benchmark. But for some reason in Napa, it's not. There's still this fuzzy area where Napa is judged by people based on what gets to them, and what gets to them just isn't a lot of these wines that come from these great sites that are then intentionally curated and crafted with the purpose of just pushing it as far as we can while still holding on to balance and elegance and grace, like a great basketball player, for example. And they don't taste those wines, they don't get those wines. So their benchmark is not benchmarking in the same way that we do, because Bordeaux has been around for so much longer. Everybody knows what Chateau Latour is, so I found that that's the case. That it's like we're talking about two different things here. So that's part of the problem.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
So you've started your own brand. You just talked about talking with Aaron, the winemaker at Spotswood, who's amazing winemaker, great guy, and those are killer wines. They've been using your fruit, and that tells me right there that that's a high quality site, because Spotswood is a brand that isn't going to be using any fruit that isn't coming from a great site. They don't have to. They don't have the intention to. They don't have. It just doesn't make sense. So you have found this great site that is now your estate vineyard. You actually live there. Your home is there with the estate vineyard. That is really cool. Can you just quickly tell me about how you got there and a little bit about your intentions behind the brand and what inspired you to get that started?
Yeah, so we were living in Napa for probably 17, 18 years, something like that. Maybe 15 years, I don't know. But I've been in Napa for a long time. But I've always wanted to live in St. Helena. Calistoga was maybe too far, but I always wanted to kind of live in a smaller town. I grew up in a really small town. I think they say 3,000 people, but I don't really think there is, maybe 2,500.
Sure.
So, I think I was a sophomore in high school where we got at one stoplight, and it was kind of in the center of town because the truck traffic going through town, there's a logging community. So there was a sawmill and the truck traffic used to be, constant. And so I think they just wanted to slow those guys down. So they put a stoplight, but it reminded me a lot of St. Helena, not quite as big, but I'm a small town boy, and I lived in Napa for a long time, and I always wanted to get up valley. So COVID, kind of set in, and my wife and I were just like, let's go look, not doing anything else. Let's go drive up to St. Helena and see if there's any houses. And so we were looking on kind of the west side, and kind of wanted a place where I could walk downtown, to the Model Bakery or wherever, coffee shop. And we have a son who's was going to be, going into high school soon. So we thought, St. Helena is more expensive, but if we have to pay a little more in mortgage, we'll probably be saving quite a bit, because our daughter went through school at a Catholic school and then went to private high school. So we would save in that, and it would be kind of a wash. And so we started looking, and just couldn't really find anything. And my wife says, can we just go look at the place out on Silverado that I told you about? And I was like, no, it's too expensive. I don't want, that's too much to bite off. And she says, can we please, let's just go look. And I said, okay. So we went and we looked at it. We pulled up in front of the house, and there's this big, massive tree right as you pull into the drive road into but there's a gate, but right in front of the gate, I stopped, and I get out, and I'm saying, oh my gosh. And she says, what? And I said, that's a cork tree. And so And so it was kind of one of those real like smile moments. And
Yeah,
and
that's
I was
cool.
like, well, so is that one, so is that one. And so there's three massive, cork trees on the property, one, really big one. But, and then we met with the realtor and she says, I start talking. I said, what about the vineyard? Who owns that? And she said, no, that's part of the house. And I said, she said, they sell the fruit. And I said, where do they sell the fruit? And they said, Spotswood. And I'm like, oh, shit. So Spotswood has always been one of my favorite producers. It's usually said as my favorite producer. Two wines always come to mind when somebody asks me about my favorite wine, and I say always my favorite wine, and hopefully Maya will believe me one of these days after me saying it so many times. But Dalavalli Maya is my all-time favorite. If I could drink any wine for the rest of my life or on my last day, it's gonna.
I'm right there with you. It's one of the best wines, yeah.
And Spotswood. So I was really enamored by that, and but it was out of our price range, and I told the realtor, I was like, well, that's a tough number, and she said, look, all you should just make an offer because this has been on the market for several months. The people who sold it are dual mortgage right now because they already bought a new place, and they'll entertain offers. I said, okay, so we sent an offer that was very low. And it was accepted. So we became, owners of a place in St. Helena. So yeah, and it had a vineyard there. And so, yeah, so pretty stoked to do that. It was a vineyard planted in 1990 by Aubert. And so done very well, kind of in that, meter by meter, high density.
Low to the ground, tight spacing.
Yeah.
Pain in the butt to farm.
Exactly, yeah. But Spotswood clone. So really, the fruit's high quality, and so we're super stoked on it. And I always thought I wanted to do a brand. I've always been a really big wine guy, and mostly, I will go meet with winemakers to talk about Cork, but I end up trying to geek out about wine. And what I find a lot is that with me and my years of doing this. You find winemakers, they don't really want to talk about wine all the time. Like you go have lunch and they kind of would like answer a question and then change the topic. And so I just found myself really trying to like nail people down and understand wine better and more, and started tasting a lot. And then I ended up just befriending a few people that were as geeky about it as me. And luckily they also made wine. So just continued kind of, that sort of way. And, we were selling the fruit. I told my wife, I think we'll probably try to do our own thing when Tristan graduates high school. And so, for instance, right now he's a freshman in high school. And that's all along what I was going to do. And then we got to the 2021s, and I went to go see Aaron and taste with him what he had in barrel from our vineyard. And I tasted it, and then I went, and I said, this is our stuff. And he says, yeah. And I said, he says, it's really good. Huh? And I was like, yeah. And Aaron takes a phone call and steps outside of his office. And I'm standing there with the enologist at the time. And she says, I said, it's good. Huh? And she said, yeah. She goes, he won't say it, but I'll tell you, it's leading our tastings right now. And I was like, oh my God, it's amazing. So anyway, really was excited about that. And so I came home and I was ended up having, I think, dinner with Maya Kaczynski that night, who's a very dear friend and just been awesome to me. I've known him since the week that he arrived into America, and we started talking. And he said, Dustin, he's like, yeah, you've always wanted to make wine, I'll help you. Let's make wine. let's keep the grapes and let's do it. I'll make sure you don't screw up. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, quit being a wimp. You just do it. And he said,
that sounds like my own.
And so I'm like, okay. So the next day I called Aaron and I said, hey, Aaron, I want to see if I can do something even half as good as what you did with our fruit. And so I'm going to keep it. And that's kind of the foundation for MOWE. So we kept the fruit in 22, and 22, a little bit of a rough harvest, right? But I feel like what we put to barrel was pretty good, and have a really, really high-end place that I'm making it using the best equipment. And so have just, some guys over my shoulder wanting to make sure that I don't screw up. And so, yeah, that's kind of the foundation for MOWE. But I really don't go into something of, I don't want just a pet project. I want a business. And because I'm really all in, not ready to give up the day job, but I'm all in on the wine project, and my wife is all in. So we're starting with the 22 cab, and then we're going to go in 23. We're going to be able to get some fruits from my favorite area in the valley. I've always been a huge fan of Pritchard Hill. I've said that if I was to buy a winery someday or was to do a brand, like I wanted to be able to work with Pritchard Hill fruit, and was just really fortunate in order to be able to secure some fruit for 23 and beyond. So really, we'll start with a couple hundred cases from our estate, a couple hundred cases. Well, to start, a couple hundred cases of the Cabernet. We'll also have a Sauvignon Blanc as well, coming from Coombsville.
Cool.
And so we'll launch with Cab, Sauvignon Blanc. Then in 23, we'll also bring on a couple hundred cases worth of Pritchard Hill. So we'll start, with 23, be about 500 cases, see what happens from there. But I'll never want to really be more than 800 or 1,000 cases. The next step would be a couple hundred cases from another AVA that I love. So kind of the plan.
That's how it starts.
Yeah.
That's how it starts. Yeah. It's a cool story. Talking to you, and we've had conversations before. It's very interesting to me. Like, a lot of your sort of benchmarks with regards to quality wines, quality people, vision, the way that you interpret things there's some similarities between the way that you think and the way that I think. We know a lot of the same people. It's kind of interesting, and kind of have the same assessment of them. These people are incredible, high quality people, and there's a lot of them in the industry. You're talking about Dalla Valle, Maya being one of your favorite wines. Dalla Valle is, I think, one of the best wines in the Napa Valley. That vineyard's amazing. And Pritchard Hill. I've made wines from the Melanson vineyard for years and years and years up in Pritchard Hill, and I've loved a lot of wines that come from the different parts of Pritchard Hill because they're all very different. And so I agree with you there. That's a really cool AVA.
AVA, Chapelet will get pissed if you.
That's right. It's not an AVA. Jeez, there you go. Chapelet has the. What do they have? They have the trademark on that, right? Yeah. So area, we'll just say area, general area that does not officially exist. It's like Area 51. Yeah. And so, it's interesting to me. I always wonder why that is. I always come back to the common denominator and things. I'm sort of fascinated with distilling things down to an energetic component. And I find that there's so much connection and congruency. And it's like a universal language spoken. And there's an energy that underlines the wines from Dalla Valle, for example. And that energy is not too dissimilar from the energy of quality and resonance that underlies good people like Mayan Koshitsky, or, we've talked about Matt Sands, we've talked about Nick Geslesen. There's a million of these guys that we both know and love and think are incredible people. The underlying factor there is a feeling of resonance, a tone, a quality of energy, a vibe, something that's enriching, something that you can match up with and sync with. And I don't know quite what that is. I think that part of my exploration in wine and my exploration in life in general is to try to figure out what that's about. It's like almost like this song that's playing underneath the drama of our lives. And I'm always aware of it, and I'm very fascinated by it. And it seems to be like this golden thread that sort of connects everything. And I think that for me, wine has been this thing that's allowed me to like crack through and take a closer peek at that, and I don't know how you feel about that, but I think
from a people perspective, I've always said that good people find a way to get to good people. And so, we kind of gravitate to each other. So really, in this business, there's a lot of amazing people, but I think someone, you just mentioned a few names. Very, Nick, very unique guy, just a wonderful human being. And Mayan, as I said, so Mayan's like my guy, him and Matt Sands as well, two of my absolute favorite people. And
two very different people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. which is cool, right? You know, so it's like, what's that common denominator there, right? You can have these incredible differences, but there's a tie, something that brings it together. And it's like, you say quality. It's like, what is quality? Like, it's tough to define, but it's there.
Yeah.
You know?
Cool. Yeah. What else?
Interesting. Well, so, you know, I don't know. I've been thinking a little bit about the idea of Cork and looking at, you know, what's coming in the future and all this kind of stuff. And the conversation, and I was thinking about this when I was getting ready to chat with you about Cork in particular, but the conversation is always about, you know, what's the future of enclosures? Is it this, you know, this type of artificial cork? Is it this type of enclosure that's just like a screw cap, or is it some sort of new thing? And well, cork is outdated, it's old fashioned, so on and so forth. I tend to be a big fan of high quality cork personally, but can you just maybe just talk to like some people, especially that are just getting into the wine business or want to be winemakers, that are sort of thinking about these things? Maybe they're starting their own brand and they're pricing out certain things, and people are telling them that it's not worth getting this, or it's better to do that, or wines age just the same in a plastic cork as they do in a. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I'll give you a big rundown from the early days to today. So essentially, if you think about, we always had natural cork was the only thing available for closing a bottle of wine, typically. Until 1992, there was a company that came out that made the first synthetic stopper. So 1992, the cork suppliers kind of looked at that and were like, whatever, you know. But then in 1994, another company came out, and then 1996 or 8, another company came out. And so, you know, the synthetic stoppers started taking on market share. We went from 100% market share to probably, I don't know, 90, let's say, or 88, 85. And so what happened was the cork producers needed to you know, take a look at this and go, wow, you know, this we're going to shrink. What's going to happen? In 1992, there was probably 3,000 cork producers in Portugal. Okay, just to give an idea. And so in the early or the late 90s, the synthetic guys started coming on. The owner of our company, he was a young guy. It's a family business, but he was taking over for an uncle, and he came and he was like, "Oh my God, you know, what did I inherit here? Like, this is a disaster, and we need to fix this." So set up an R&D team with a few PhDs. We built a new factory in 2001. A second brand new factory in 2003, and just started investing and really trying to get better. All the while, the synthetics continued to skyrocket, and so we got to probably, you know, when, as I said, 100% market share. Early 2000s probably got to where we had maybe only 60% market share. So yeah, it was a huge loss. So essentially, what happened was the good producers, you know, rose to the top. The bad producers were going by the wayside. So in 2010, we went, as I said, was maybe 3,000 producers in Portugal alone to less than 600 in 2010. So lots of companies went bust. And so, but the good ones, you know, continue to grow and do well. So we continue to invest. In 2010, I'll tell you that you had, if you looked at Wine Business Monthly, they do their top 50 wineries every year. The issue came out last month. It was the top 50 U.S. wineries by volume. And so if you looked at the top 30, back in 2010, 23 of them used synthetic stoppers. So the vast majority were using synthetic. If you look at that same number in 2020, it was complete. Well, let me just use today's figure. In 2023, you have one. It's called Gallup. Only guy using synthetic stoppers today. So synthetic stoppers went away. We had 9 synthetic stopper companies selling in the U.S. market. Today you have 1. And so the synthetics went completely away. And why? The reality is this. We needed to clean up our act. We needed a real kick in the teeth in order to do that. But we did do that, and we succeeded. So if I can go to a winery and I can give you a product that is similarly priced as, say, a synthetic, that is natural cork, that is guaranteed to not contain TCA or it's not going to spoil your wine, and is giving you a very big environmental benefit Why not? And so we basically, to expand on that, we essentially it's been 6 to 8 years ago, we commissioned a study by PricewaterhouseCoopers to do a full life cycle assessment of closures to say, is there a sustainability benefit of using a cork versus plastic versus screw cap and so on? And what they did, and this we paid for it, but this is an independent company. I mean, you don't pay off PricewaterhouseCoopers. This is a multi-million-dollar, maybe even $1 billion global company. So they came and did this study, and they said, essentially, the way that the study finalized was this: for every stopper that you put into a glass bottle, the stopper will help retain 392 grams of CO2 per closure used. So if you use a bottle, let's say you're a value wine and you're $15, that bottle is usually between 250 and 500 grams. Now, so let's say it's 350. Let's say it's 400. For every stopper you put into that bottle, you are canceling out the carbon footprint of the glass. So when you tell that to a marketing person or one of these guys inside a big company like St. Michel or Constellation and so on, they say, oh my God, like we're actually negative. We're by using a cork, and it's not going to taint the wine, and it's very close in price to plastic. We're going to have this huge environmental benefit in terms of our carbon footprint, in terms of having
it's biodegradable.
So this I kind of joke, but I'm half serious. This saved our industry. We had to clean up.
I didn't realize that the numbers were so drastic. That change from the early 90s to 2001. Yep. I didn't realize it's that big. And I do remember
because in the US it wasn't such a huge swing, but the numbers that I tell you about the top 30
globally, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I know there's certain countries that really went big. I think Australia did a lot of non-cork enclosures and stuff, and they're big producers of wine. So yeah, that makes sense. That's really interesting. I remember 2010 at Symposium, the Wine and Grape Symposium. It did seem like I looked around and everything was all about non-cork enclosures. It was all the big sponsorships. It was like the Zork and the screw cap and the this and that. That was like the cool big thing, all the swag. I probably have a couple pairs of boxer shorts from a synthetic cork company or something that I got for free. No, I'm just kidding. It's sort of a joke because Symposium's like trick or treating. You go around and get free swag and stuff. But
that's kind of the change with the cork. And so what was interesting is that we have on the value segment, the lower tiers, we have this product that, as I said, gives this amazing environmental benefit. But then on the higher end cork, we never had a process that was a silver bullet to be able to just remove TCA from cork. And so in 2016, we developed a system where we analyze every cork by cork. And this enabled us to sell cork saying, hey, every cork has been tested. And so therefore we're capturing, that low end of the segment with these products are called microagglomerated corks, where you are able to sell for the lower tier a cork that isn't going to taint the wine. And then you have this higher tier for the luxury market where every cork is tested. So you kind of, are checking all the boxes. And so
I've used those and they're great. They really are great. And for me too, I just feel that wines with a good quality cork, let's say, you've got like a 54 millimeter cork, high grade, TCA free. Not only does it look really cool, but I feel like there's just a rhythm to the aging that just can't be matched by any other enclosure. There's something about opening up a bottle that's 15 years old or 20 years old that has a really high quality cork to it. And just, can you talk a little bit just quickly about what is it between natural cork and the aging of wine? What's the relationship? What's the rhythm?
Yeah, sure. So really what happens is a cork is made up of thousands of little cells. So if you look at a cork under a microscope, it looks just like honeycomb. And so you're taking a cork that's typically 24 millimeters diameter, you're compressing it down to 15.5 and shoving it into a bottle that then rebounds back to an idea of 18.5. So really, what happens when you put it in the the bottle is you have on the top of the bottle, you have oxygen being pushed out, you have oxygen being pushed in. So when you look at the OTR curve of cork is an oxygen transmission rate, is what I refer to OTR is, and you look at the curve, you have a pretty good spike at bottling. And for that first 6 months, because the cork is essentially just slowly letting air escape that was captured inside that, those cells. And so you shove the cork into the bottle, you have that air kind of micro-oxing into the bottle. And so you have this spike right at bottling, and then it's kind of a pretty linear curve that goes and eventually will flatline. So it's absolutely perfect for aging wine. However, the problem with stoppers has been their inherent variability. So this is not every stopper is going to be the same in the bag that you bought. So this is something that we've been fighting with for a long time, and really trying to invest to understand more in what can be done to narrow the variability factor. Right. But then with some other types of closures, such as screw caps, you don't have that spike of oxygen at bottling, and then it's just a flat line. It's a almost a hermetic seal. And people can come back and say, oh, but we use the XYZ liner. Well, okay, so you get just even a fraction more spike at bottling and a flat line. So I have not seen any results that are statistically relevant of different liners of screw caps, performing even remotely close to how cork does. So really that's kind of it. By having this initial spike of oxygen and then a slight micro-ox is what gives cork that sort of longevity benefit, and then it does flatline. It does stop, and then it stays flat.
Sure.
So
I think it sort of allows for the wine to sort of adjust itself, and settle in. Yeah.
And there's also another thing that we've studied, which is very interesting, in that, we've said, okay, we know that if you just did a trial and you put a high quality cork in a bottle and you put a screw cap next to it, and we tested these for 5+ years, that typically the cork is going to be preferred. And we're saying, why? If it's not flawed, why? We need to understand is there a benefit that cork is providing, and is there, for instance, are there phenolics in cork tissue itself that contribute positively to wine evolution post-bottling? So we studied that, and there's some interesting research being done to try to understand, what sort of phenolic contribution cork makes to wine positively, and that's ongoing, research that it's just pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear about that when you get more information on that, because it makes sense. I mean, the cork is touching the wine, for the lifetime until it's open. So does it have an impact or not? I definitely prefer natural cork, high quality natural cork. So I want to kind of wrap things up. I want to get from you somebody who's been successful in this industry, who I think is going to find a lot of success now as a producer and beyond. What are some of the, if you look back, what are some of the things, I know you talked about customer service, but is there some things that really helped you grow and develop? What are some of the key things? Was it a book you read, an idea, something that you hammered away that helped you grow and build and succeed and become a good leader?
I think, lead by example is really something that has always been instilled in me. I believe that there's no job, that is, below me. I mean, I yesterday here in the company, I fixed the toilet.
Oh, good.
Sometimes you have to do some dirty work. I really think that, the big, I've had some great mentors in my life. The biggest asset that I'd say the biggest thing that had happened to me was when I took over PortoCork. I kind of knew how to lead a team just based upon my athletic background. I was really big into football, and so I kind of felt like I had some leadership skill, but I just didn't, you need to be able to put it all together. When you start getting into a professional environment, you have to be able to, it's a little different. And so when I took over PortoCork in 2006, I hired a management coach. And this was pivotal in my, growth as a person, as a professional, and really, I think I would have probably been very lost and very lonely if I didn't make that decision and invest in that person helping me along the way. So I ended up, they say it's the old saying is kind of a joke. It's lonely at the top. It really is. I mean, I report to a board of directors that's 7,000 miles away, and a lot of the issues that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, there's a lot that can be riding on your shoulders, and so it's always nice to have somebody to talk to. So I found myself even, keeping this person. I would go and talk to her, and she'd say, "So why do you keep coming back? Like, you don't need me anymore. You're doing just fine. You got this." And I said, I think I just need somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
But
that's really cool. Yeah, that's really cool. And it's something that I have now as I'm kind of embarking on a personal growth journey, and I have a lot of growth to do. And this is one thing that as I'm talking to more people that I consider to be very successful and good quality people, they keep telling me you can't do it alone. You need a good network of friends and confidants, but you also need mentors. And also there's something, that people have been talking about, like therapy. Like I go to therapy through the VA and all of that stuff, but like just having someone to talk to, whether it's therapy or a friend or a mentor, is important. And also having a team, other people to bounce things off of. I think I see that the most successful people really do have the humility and the intelligence to utilize other people to help breathe some context, to help make suggestions and push, and even just have somebody to talk to is super important too. So I think that's really cool that you're sort of echoing that, because I've been finding that a lot, actually. A lot of people are saying that, don't lone wolf it, be humble, ask questions, observe. And I think that's cool that you're sort of mirroring that.
I think something that I'll say too that is very important for success, and I'm still, every day I think about this at least once, and I'm still learning, is to be a good listener. Sometimes we think we have the answers. Sometimes we think we know more than the other people in the room. But I'm just learning myself more and more that you need to listen, and so that I think is very important.
Yeah. It's cool you're touching on that, because I've noticed that too. It's something I need to work on. That's actually one of the reasons I started the podcast, was like, I wanted to force myself to try to listen more. And I'm not always successful, as people who watch this podcast can tell. Sometimes I run on when I get excited, but I wanted to be able to put myself on the spot and be able to watch myself and say, hey, was I talking more than I was listening? Or was I listening more than I was talking? And so that's cool. I think that is an important trait, and I'm learning that is very important more and more in my life. And I'm actually trying to be a better listener. Like I said, I'm not always successful, but I'm working toward that goal. And I think it's so far been very valuable for me. So, and it's, like you said, been valuable to you. So that's cool. So how can we get a hold of you? What's the best way people can find out more information about your wine project, your estate wines, and
so it's MOWENapaValley.com. We just have a landing page up right now, so people can log on and sign up, and we'll be going live with something a little bigger soon. And then PortoCork.com. So PortoCork is PortoCork, PortoCork.com, to learn about that as well. So, yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, hey, thanks a lot. I appreciate you coming on board. And I'm looking forward to just watching things grow and develop and just keeping in touch. And I'm sure we're going to do a lot more cool things in the future too. We got some stuff coming up. So
look forward to it. Thanks for having me, Dave. Great time. And as usual. And I'll look forward to seeing you again sometime soon.
Okay. All right, brother.
Thanks.
Cheers.